The Curse of the Dark Pharaoh. A strange wind blows in Arkham. Mysterious strangers walk its streets, and exotic artifacts trade hands in shady backroom deals. A museum exhibit of relics and tomes from ancient Egypt has come to town, and with it, an influx of dangerous cultists, supernatural events, and the all too familiar danger of an ancient one awakening from its slumber. Once again, the investigators are the only ones who can, through luck, lore, and courage, stop it. An excerpt from the Arkham Advertiser. Professor Armitage, who spearheaded the relations with Cairo University to arrange for the trade, said that, quote, acquiring the visiting museum exhibit is a bold step for Arkham University on the world stage, end quote. Adding that the semester's course offerings would reflect the added research potential offered by the exhibit. Father Michael from South Church, on the other hand, has asked his petitioners to boycott the exhibit. The father was not available for comment, but sources close to him say that he is still shaken from last year's troubles, during which several shops closed and several mysterious killings occurred. Other sources, who requested to remain anonymous, say that another such series of troubles has already begun.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. And welcome back to the continuing coverage of Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. And in this episode, we will be taking a look at the first of the expansions, and that is the small box expansion for Curse of the Dark Pharaoh. I think this is somewhat of a lackluster expansion, and I think that Fantasy Flight agreed because they ended up releasing a revised version of that expansion. I'll talk a little bit about the revised version later, but I have no experience with the revised version. I didn't even know it ever existed, even when this was new and I bought it. When the revised came out, I had no idea. Maybe, I guess I just wasn't plugged in to that kind of board game knowledge at that time. But the revised version is very, very expensive. I have a feeling that they printed just only a few copies, very few copies of that revised edition. And I've seen it go for, almost $150. And I don't think it's worth it. This expansion is pretty lackluster from what I know about the revised version. It's also just kind of okay. And so I think the kind of overall review of this, if you're just looking at this video as a consumer report, is if you are getting into Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, if you are starting to collect these kind of more vintage Fantasy Flight games, this might be an expansion that you want to skip unless you are just a completionist. If I had to seek this out on its own and it didn't come in the bundle that I rebought when I rebought everything for this game, I probably would not have sought after Curse of the Dark Pharaoh. It's okay. So in this video, we'll be going over a little bit of the game that I am playing. I just started, this is my third game using this expansion that I have been playing over the last couple of weeks. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about the stuff that comes with Curse of the Dark Pharaoh and what I think of it. We will do another entry of Appendix M, in which I have 3 books to recommend. And then we will just kind of maybe briefly go over what I know about the revised version and then conclude the video. So yes, as the name suggests, this is all about the Curse of the Dark Pharaoh. A museum exhibit has rolled into town. And there are actually 2 different ways that you can play this expansion. You can play the permanent exhibit style. And in that style of play, you will just mix all of the stuff that comes in this box into their corresponding decks into your base Arkham Horror 2nd Edition stuff. So that kind of dilutes it. That is not my favorite way to play the Arkham Horror expansions. I like to keep a lot of the stuff separate, at least the stuff that makes the games unique. So I prefer to use the visiting exhibit playstyle. And with that playstyle, you basically use only the stuff from this game, along with some stuff from your base Arkham Horror game. And I find that that makes the expansions shine a little better. Their components don't get diluted, and you have a little more of a focus on what makes each expansion special, what makes each expansion different. And in this case, it is focusing on that exhibit coming in and some of the more Egyptian style encounters that you might have because of the theming of the Curse of the Dark Pharaoh. And in my game, because of the Curse of the Dark Pharaoh, I am, of course, playing against Nyarlathotep, and it has been a fun week facing off against Nyarlathotep, the Dark Pharaoh here, the Haunter of the Dark, the Bloated Woman, the Black Man, all of his names. Nyarlathotep is a god with 100 masks, and of course, Nyarlathotep is one of the only great old ones to have direct confrontation, direct action, to take direct interest in humanity. So it is kind of an interesting great old one. So if you watched my review of Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, you will know that usually I like to play against Azathoth just because it doesn't have that last battle, because as soon as Azathoth wakes up, everything in existence blinks out. It stops existing. Existence stops existing. But with this expansion, with the Curse of the Dark Pharaoh expansion, Azathoth can be very challenging because one of the things that this expansion can do is elevate or accelerate the end game. It can make filling up this Doom track a lot faster. And so I have chose to fight against Nyarlathotep. So Nyarlathotep is resistant to magic. So that means any weapon or spell that you are using that adds to your magical attack, those results are halved. He has a -4 combat value, so that means that your dice pool when you attack Nyarlathotep will be -4. So if you have a dice pool of 5d6 and that -4, that will only leave you with 1 die for that final confrontation. The worshippers, so all of the cultists who worship Nyarlathotep, they are endless. So that means that when you kill them, they don't go back into your crown royal bag. They don't go back into your monster, or they do go back into your monster cup, into your crown royal bag. They are not kept as trophies. And then in that last battle, in the final confrontation, you have to pass, the investigators have to pass a lore check. So if I had a lore of 3, I would have to get at least 1 success, so 1 green there. That would be a success. Or I would have to lose a clue token. And if I had no clue tokens to lose, my investigator would be devoured. And so once all the investigators are devoured in the last confrontation, that is the end of the game. So it is important to, when you face off against Nyarlathotep, when you have that final confrontation, you need a pretty good stack of clue tokens to be able to withstand multiple rounds of combat with this great old one. And then finally, Nyarlathotep, because he is a god that wears many masks, you will add the mask creatures, the mask monsters from your base game into your monster cup. And so these are 5 of the different avatars, 5 of the different masks that Nyarlathotep can wear. We have the God of the Bloody Tongue, the Bloated Woman, the Black Man, the Dark Pharaoh, and the Haunter of the Dark. And so because this game can have its ending accelerated because of the Dark Pharaoh expansion, I have chosen a certain strategy to take care of Nyarlathotep. And I am playing, and I have been playing during this week of almost completely ignoring all gates and just not even going to other worlds while I am playing this game. I am focusing, and because he is also magical resistant, I am not going to the curiosity shop. I'm not really worried about spells. What I have been trying to focus on is moving around the board, grabbing these clue tokens, which will allow me to withstand multiple rounds of combat against Nyarlathotep. I'm trying to get money, and then I'm trying to get over to the general store to buy physical weapons like shotguns and dynamite and that kind of thing, and then accelerating that end game, pushing that end game forward, letting Arkham get overrun by monsters and gates so that Nyarlathotep wakes up faster, he's summoned faster, and then I can just get to a physical confrontation with Nyarlathotep. I think that's a pretty good strategy to play against Nyarlathotep when you are using the Dark Pharaoh expansion. So I did want to talk briefly about my first turn here, and one of the things that I love about Arkham Horror, or there's two things. One, actually there's a lot of things I love, but two of the things that I really love, and I was reminded of during this last week of gameplay, is that one, the game can be set up so quickly, and that I love that you can set this game up really fast, especially for how much stuff there is. And second, I love how even on the first turn, interesting things can happen. This is not a game that you have to wait a long time to get to the good stuff. The good stuff can start happening right away. And I have this first turn set up, and I just wanted to show you what was happening. So in this game, I am playing with Kate Winthrop, Mandy Thompson. Those are two of my ladies of Arkham. I love both of them. You'll see their character sheets on the screen now. And then I'm also adding to the mix Ashcan Pete. And of course, Ashcan Pete has his lucky ally, Duke the dog, which unfortunately sometimes Duke gets sacrificed in order to protect old Ashcan Pete. So I always feel bad for Duke the dog. He almost never makes it through a full through a full game. That's so sad. But here we have kind of the end of the first turn here. So I wanted to show that Ashcan Pete here, he started over in the river docks. He comes in to Arkham on the river docks, and there were two clues here up here in the unvisited isle. And so he made his way to the unvisited isle. During the encounter phase, I drew an encounter card for the unvisited isle, and here's what that said. As you row along the island shore, a tree branch cracks and falls towards you. Make a speed +0 check. So I had a lower speed for Ashcan Pete, and I failed that test. And so this says that if you fail, you are knocked out and wake up far downstream. Move to the graveyard and your turn ends. So Ashcan Pete comes into the river docks, makes his way up on the shore to the unvisited isle on his boat, trying to look for these clues to stop some cultists of Nyarlathotep. Maybe he heard that there was some kind of cult that was meeting on the isle. But as he approached, a tree fell, it knocked him out, and he floated downriver all the way down here to the graveyard. And what should be at the graveyard but a gate, the opening gate for the game, and, oh my god, a Shoggoth. One of the most dreaded monsters in the Monster Cup in the base game. And so I just imagine Ashcan Pete, he gets hit, he's stunned, he's dazed. He's floating down the river. He washes up on the shore near this graveyard. He kind of claws his way up through the mud, uses an old kind of crumbling and a mossy headstone to pull himself up, and his eyes just breach the top of the tombstone, and he looks over, and in the middle of the graveyard, he sees this pulsing cavern, or this pulsing gate, this weird thing that's pulsing with energy and emanating evil. And out from that walks this horrific beast. And now he is there waiting for his next turn to figure out what the heck he's going to do. So because that card said your turn ends, I don't have another encounter. If that didn't say my turn and my turn would have ended, then I could have also been sucked into this gate. But because my turn ends, I don't have to encounter this space until my next turn. So because I was trying to get some money, I decided to send my ladies of Arkham, Mandy Thompson and Kate Winthrop. They were working at Miskatonic University, and I wanted to send them up to the newspaper because the newspaper is a great location to try to get some money, to maybe earn a little extra scratch. And Kate, she did okay. She had just kind of a low-key encounter. Nothing really interesting happened to her. But Mandy Thompson had this encounter here. New at the newspaper, a competitor to the Arkham Advertiser offers you money to sabotage the presses. If you accept, gain $5 and make a sneak -2 check. If you fail, you are arrested as well as barred from the north side. All right, so I got arrested. So Mandy Thompson, the researcher, she goes up, she tries to sabotage the Arkham Advertiser, all for $5. Hey man, she's a cheap saboteur there, but she got her money, she failed her test, and then now I am barred from the north side. And being barred from a neighborhood is one of the new things that can happen to you in this expansion. And so when you're barred from a certain neighborhood, you take the barred from that neighborhood card, and then you can no longer move purposefully. You can no longer consciously move. You can be moved by a game event or something like that, but you can't choose to move into the north side until this card goes away. And one of the only ways, at least the only way I know of, is to discard these cards is to have the terror level of Arkham increase. And the terror level can increase if there are too many monsters or gates. So Mandy Thompson has been arrested. She is going off to the jail cell, and she is also barred from the north side for trying to do some of that industrial espionage, that journalistic espionage against the Arkham advertiser. So that was just a really fun and interesting first turn. It didn't go in my favor, but often these games, the games of Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, are most fun and most memorable when things don't go in your favor. Okay, now let's take a look at the components, at the stuff that you get with your expansion. And again, this is the unrevised version. The revised version comes with a couple additional components, but those can easily be proxied, and one of the main components is another herald. And we haven't encountered the heralds yet. The heralds are another kind of, think of them as kind of like a mini boss version of an great old one. And a herald is kind of another scenario modifier that you can add to your games that do make the games harder. I never play with the heralds because I think the game is hard enough. However, there are people, like I said in my review for 2nd edition, there are people who have played Arkham Horror many, many, many hundreds of times, and they know everything about the game. They are experts at the game, and they started to find the game too easy, too predictable because they knew everything. And so Fantasy Flight introduced this mechanism of a herald, which is another kind of mini boss, another way you can modify the scenario to make it easier. Fantasy Flight also ended up offering up things called guardians, and those were scenario modifiers that actually made the game easier. And those I do use because I find that the easier the game is, the more fun I have, the more fun I can have focusing on the adventure. And so that is why I almost never use the heralds, but I don't have to worry about that because my version of the original Curse of the Dark Pharaoh doesn't come with that herald. But I'll show a picture of the herald on the screen right now so you can check that out. And so you can easily find that and apply it and just play with it, print out your own copy. But the things you will get in Curse of the Dark Pharaoh are you will get five new location cards for each of the neighborhoods. So you get a pretty large deck of encounter cards. Again, I like to keep these separate, and when I'm playing this expansion, I use only these encounter cards. I don't use any of the neighborhood of the Arkham encounter cards from the base game. And so I'm having a very directed, a focused experience that is focused purely on the story that this expansion is relaying. And one of the reasons why is because these cards, along with the other world encounters, these are some of the only ways that you can get what is probably the second most important element of this expansion, and these are the museum relics, the artifacts, the cursed artifacts from Egypt that have come in with this museum exhibit. And so these are new items. These are kind of like your unique items, but they are all thematically focused on this kind of Egypt theme. So there are, I believe, 22 of these or 21, and some of them are pretty cool. I am a little disappointed. Once again, this expansion is just a little bit disappointed. Even though there are only 22, you get a lot of duplicates. Some of them you get actually three copies of the same card. So that is a little unfortunate. It would have been nice to have more variety, but some of these can be pretty powerful, especially these parchment of the elder sign. So these are another way that you can get what equates to an elder sign. So getting elder signs is always a good thing in this game because that's one of the ways that you can seal a gate and also remove those doom tokens from your great old one. But we have things like the pentagram of blood, or the chime of Ra, the eye of light and darkness, the summoning glass, the mask of the messenger, the mask of the black pharaoh, the tablet of Bast here, the book of Anubis, Wasn't there a Book of Thoth in here? Yeah, the Scales of Thoth. So the Book of Thoth, that was a an esoteric tome created by Richard L. Tierney and used a lot in his stories, Simon of Gita. And man, those Simon of Gita stories are amazing. I just finished up the complete collection, and it's very, very good. But yeah, so you'll get a whole bunch of new unique items, but these are not unique items that are added to your deck. They are kept separate. And yeah, if you just flip through the encounter cards, you can see just all the various encounters. I don't want to spoil anything too much, just because I know people like keeping these encounters kind of a surprise. But then you will also get a deck of your Mythos cards. And I think I showed these as gate encounters. These are the gate encounters that you get. But you will get a deck of Mythos cards. And the way that I'm playing with the visiting exhibit style of play is I keep my expansion Mythos cards separate from my regular Mythos cards. And then each turn, you alternate what stack you draw from. And so every other turn, you will draw a Mythos card that has something to do with the Curse of the Dark Pharaoh. So I think that's a really interesting way to play. Now, one of the things that this expansion does is it has a few cards in the Mythos deck that will add 2 Doom tokens to the track. A gate doesn't appear, but you will fill up your Doom track very quickly playing this expansion. And so that's one reason why I do not recommend using Azathoth in this expansion because, as you know, the Doom track can fill up quickly and then it's just game over. If you want to play a really fast game, if you think games of Arkham Horror are too long, play this expansion, play the visiting museum mode, the visiting exhibit mode, and play with Azathoth. That game will be over in a blink of an eye. But so these Mythos cards, again, are more focused on the story that this expansion is trying to tell. Same as your Otherworld encounters. When I'm playing in this style, I only use these encounter cards. So my other otherworldly encounter cards from second edition are kept in the box along with the Arkham encounter cards. You will also get a handful of new allies. And so this expansion came out before they had the rule of only using 11 allies in a game that was later made through an FAQ or through errata. And so the way that this expansion, the first edition, plays is you are supposed to keep your deck of allies separate. And then anytime that you are told to remove an ally from the game, you remove one ally from each deck. I don't play like that. I play with a subdeck of 11 allies and I just mix my allies together. But the allies that you get from this expansion are Eric Carlisle, Sarah Danforth, Eric Weiss, Father Iwaniki, Dr. Ali Kafur, The Messenger, and David Packard. So those will be your allies. Then you also get a handful of spells. And once again, I think the spells are pretty weak. This is a game when I use this expansion and I use these spells, I almost never use the spells. That happens a lot in Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, unfortunately. More often than not, I will get a spell at the beginning of the game and I will go through the whole game never using that spell. Sometimes it's because I'm forgetful and I forget that it might be useful, but often it's just because I don't find them very useful. But we have things like the Shroud of Shadow, I should say, the Revelation of Script, Denying the Ancient One. This is actually a really cool spell because this spell will negate these some of the powers of the Ancient One, of the Great Old One. The Marking of Isis, the Plague of Locusts. Again, you do get a lot of duplicates, which is unfortunate because there aren't a lot of cards. So the variety in this expansion is just lacking a little bit. This one here is good too, Astral Travel, so you can go straight into a gate anywhere in Arkham. I think that's pretty cool. However, the spells do have another reason for existing, another benefit in this expansion, and that's because of one of the benefit cards. So you can be granted visions, and this is really cool. Visions will allow any other investigator to discard spells in order to gain clue tokens equal to 1 plus the spell's sanity cost. That is great. And so I have right now, Kate Winthrop has visions, and she has 2 spells. Mandy Thompson has none. So what I was going to do, and I forgot to do it actually, is when they met in the newspaper, I was going to have Kate give her spells to Mandy, and then Kate was going to use her visions to allow Mandy to turn those two spells into clues. But I forgot to do that, so now I'll have to do that on another turn. There are a couple of other new benefits that you can learn in this expansion, and that is the private investigator. You can become anointed and you can become psychic. There are also some detriments that you can suffer from, and you can become harried, wanted, a local guide, or tainted. And then finally, we have all of our bard cards. And so when you are barred, not barred as in a musical bard, but when you are barred, when you are prevented entry from a location, you will pass these cards out to the investigator, and that investigator can no longer go into that neighborhood. Okay, now it's time for my favorite parts of these videos, and that is the Appendix M. And I am putting together a list of books that I recommend for fans of the Arkham Files board games. And in this portion, in this episode of Appendix M, I am recommending 3 complete books. The first is the Cthulhu Mythos Encyclopedia, written by Daniel Harms. This book is so much fun. It has so much information. It is an encyclopedia of all of the things associated with the mythos, both new and old. When does this go up to? Let's see here, 2008. So I don't know if there's a newer edition. There might be, and that might be worth investing in. But investigating. I got those two words confused. It might be worth investing in and investigating, I guess. Hey, that's thematic, right? But what I like to do is I like to keep my Cthulhu Mythos Encyclopedia nearby when I am playing a game, and then I can look stuff up about the things that I have discovered. And so I wanted to do an example here. So we have these mask monsters, and these are avatars. These are aspects of Nyarlathotep. These are different forms that this great old one takes in different ways to interact with humanity. And so I did want to read a little bit about these so you can get some of that idea. So if we turn to the Nyarlathotep section here, we can read about Nyarlathotep, so also called the Crawling Chaos, the Mighty Messenger, the soul and messenger of the outer gods. It is said to dwell in a cavern at the center of the world, accompanied by 2 mindless flutists. It often carries messages and performs services for the great old ones and other gods, being the only one of them who seems free and able to do so. But if we turn over here, we start to see all of the different forms that Nyarlathotep can take, such as Atu in the Congo, or maybe Akushinkage in Japan. And here one we have is the Bloated Woman. And the Bloated Woman, I believe, is from Asia, maybe China. Let me see here. The Bloated Woman is an aspect of Nyarlathotep found in China. So this says that Nyarlathotep appears as a huge, obese woman with 5 mouths and many tentacles. It carries the mystical black fan, with which it magically hides an unseemly bulk from humans until it has ensnared them. The cult has deep roots in China and holds the books Goddess of the Black Fan and the Tale of Priest Quan as holy. Okay, we also have here, we have the God of the Bloody Tongue. So we can look up God of the Bloody Tongue here, the God of the Bloody Tongue from Kenya. For the rituals of the cults of the Bloody Tongue, Nyarlathotep here takes the form of a huge monster with a long red tentacle where its face should be. The cult primarily consists of Kenyans, and its center is the Mountain of the Black Wind. This avatar might also have been the inspiration for Kowal, an important Mayan god. This form is also known as the Howler in Darkness. See Cult of the Bloody Tongue from Masks of Nyarlathotep. Really cool. I love using this book in conjunction with the game, with that learning process of learning about all of these myths and lore. And I think this is thematic because this expansion is all about a museum, an exhibit coming into town. And museums and exhibits are often places that we go to learn and experience new things. And so in that vein, the 2 books that I'm recommending next are 2 of my absolute favorite books of mythos fiction. And both of these are edited by Nate Peterson, and they are the Starry Wisdom Library. Hey, which the Starry Wisdom, the Cult of the Starry Wisdom, the Church of the Starry Wisdom, also has connections to Nyarlathotep. As a matter of fact, we could read about the Starry Wisdom cult here in the encyclopedia. And then we also have the Dagon collection. Now, both of these are collections of thematic short stories that are presented as item descriptions for an auction that a museum might have to a private collector, for an auction that somebody from a museum might go to acquire artifacts, to acquire relics for their exhibits. And these two books are so committed to the way that they present their themes. And so when you start opening this up, you will read this introduction about the auction that you are about to participate in. And here we have the catalog of the occult library. So if you guys remember, the Church of the Starry Wisdom was fabled to have a large library, a large collection of esoteric tomes. And so this auction, the Starry Wisdom Library auction, a catalog of the greatest occult book auction of all time, is the items that are being auctioned off in this auction from that library. And so each of the items has a description and a small story written by a number of different authors. So we have Catalog of the Occult Library of the recently disbanded Church of Starry Wisdom of Providence, Rhode Island, embellished by essays from learned scholars on the histories of the notorious volumes, illustrated with 6 curious designs, the entirety to be sold at private auction at 2729 Harrowdale Street, Arkham, Massachusetts, on Sunday, June 24th, 1877 at 7 p.m. Present the sign of the Emperor to gain admission. And then we get into a little introduction about the items that are being offered. There are 44 different esoteric tomes that are being offered. And then we have our table of contents here, which is all of the various tomes and the different authors who are writing. So we have Gamma Files. We have Michael Sisko. Who else contributed to this? Nick Mamatas. We have Paul Langan and Matt Carden and Robert M. Price. So just all kinds of great authors contributed to this collection of esoteric knowledge here. And man, this book is just so cool. I love it. I love it so much. I love how committed it is to its theme, to the way that it is presenting the information as if you are reading about these books that are being sold at an auction and you're reading about them as if they are true. It's really committed to selling its premise. And the same goes for the Dagon collection, which is a very similar book, but this is a catalog of all of the items that were confiscated when the government moved into the town of Innsmouth. And so these are all of the things that the esoteric order of Dagon had in their cult, in their church, and these are all items that are being auctioned off. And so I just thought that both of these books, not only are both of these books some of my favorite mythos books of all time, I absolutely love them. I just thought that they really fit with the theming of this museum coming into town, coming into Arkham, this museum focused on the curse of the Dark Pharaoh. Okay, so we are about ready to wrap things up. I thought I would talk just very, very briefly on the revised version of this expansion. I've already mentioned the Herald, and so you can easily find the Herald if you just Google whatever it's called. I can't remember. It'll be on screen a couple of times in this video, but if you Google that, you can find that image and you can make your own Herald and just look up the Herald rules. It's pretty easy because you just add them basically as a sub-boss, as another little great old one to fight against to change up the game. One thing you will get are these new tokens. And those tokens are, from what I can gather, they are distributed throughout the map. And when an investigator lands on one of those tokens, they have a chance to grab one of these relics, one of these artifacts. So it makes getting these a little easier. You don't have to have the encounters to get to the really cool stuff in the expansion. However, if you play with those tokens, there is a 1 in 6 chance that when you pick up that relic, when you pick up that exhibit item, that it is cursed, and then you will become cursed. And as we have established, as everybody knows, being cursed in this game is the absolute worst. And so I'm not sure if that's worth it. It makes getting these easier, but I don't know. It's a good trade-off, I guess. It's a good kind of press your luck element. But that's another thing that you could very easily simulate. You could very easily proxy. You could just grab a few tokens that you have. I think it's 8 tokens. I'm not sure how many. And then you could randomly distribute those throughout Arkham. And then those could be little side quests that your investigators have to go. Maybe they have learned about something at the Unnameable or at the general store, and they're going and they're investigating those clues, and then they're finding these artifacts. So that might be a way to play. Some of the spells, some of the items, some of the encounters were changed. There is a very detailed explanation of everything on BGG. Of course, if you go into this forum for Curse of the Dark Pharaoh, you can read about all of the nuanced changes. And there seems to be a subset of people who have mixed and matched different elements from the original and from the revised to create their own kind of uber version of the expansion. We also do have to keep in mind when we finally get to it is that is the final expansion for Arkham Horror 2nd Edition is the Miskatonic Horror expansion. And that is an expansion that expands the expansions. And so that expansion also adds stuff to this expansion. How many times can I say the word expansion? But anyways, yeah. So that was Curse of the Dark Pharaoh. And we also took a look during the Appendix M portion at the Dagon Collection, the Starry Wisdom Library, and the Cthulhu Mythos Encyclopedia. So all 3 of those books are great. This expansion is not great. It's okay. If you're a completionist, then yes, you're going to want this. If you get it in a bundle, hey, don't turn your nose at it. Kindly accept it. If you need to seek this out, I don't know if it's worth the money, especially the revised version. The way I like to play is I like to keep things separated. So when I am playing this expansion, I have a more directly focused game that is focused on what this expansion offers. If I were to mix and match things, I think what I would do is I would only use the encounter cards that this game comes with, and I would add each of these cards to its corresponding deck in the base game. And so that would give you a little more variety because that is one place where that game could use a little more variety. You would have 5 more encounters for each location. And if you do that, you would also need to keep this deck handy, the Relics deck handy, the exhibit deck, because there is a chance that you might get one of these in one of these cards. So you could easily add both of these decks to your base game to have a slightly expanded and a slightly more thematic version of your base game. And so as we go through the expansions in this series, I will talk about the things that I do end up incorporating into my base game. And I'm pretty sure what I'm going to do is I am going to take these and I am going to take these and put those permanently in my box of Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. So, all right, you guys. Well, hope you enjoyed this review of Curse of the Dark Pharaoh and this episode of Appendix M. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.